So we are delighted to have Adam on the show today. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you, Adam.
And Adam, it'd be great to podcast today is how to hire great talent as a leader. So it'd be great to kind of hear from you, first of all, maybe to introduce yourself to the audience and what you kind of what you bring to the table in terms of helping leaders hire great talent.
Sure. So, by way of intro, so I'm a specialist sales go-to-market recruiter. I've been doing this over 10 years now. Previous life, I was a teacher. I was a business studies and IT teacher, and had a weird turn of events and became a recruiter. So I now operate my business, which is called Rev Hire. I'm a solo operation, so it's just me, and I work with tech startups. Probably spend 80-90% of my time hiring in the US. I'm based in the UK though. But I work globally. So this morning I've been speaking to country managers in India about a role there. I'll finish my day today speaking to CSMs in San Francisco. So I've got a really global role, but it's kind of US centric. And I just love speaking to people. I love hiring, love the buzz of hiring people, love making matches. And I preach quality over quantity. So I speak to so many people who find hiring hard. And whenever I hear of someone that's, seeing 10 resumes or more to make a hire, I love it because I know I can add some value, and that's what excites me. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And companies use me in two ways. I kind of work the traditional model where I get paid a percentage of their salary, or now as well, people kind of engage me as like a fractional talent partner where I can come in for a few months and help them through busy hiring periods. So that's me.
Great. Yeah, I can definitely testify to that quality over quantity. I remember you helped me massively in that regard before. And yeah, Pat, over to you. I think it'd be great for you to add some context as well about why we feel this is really important to have Adam talk about the subject matter.
Yeah, sure. And so, well, as you know, when you're a chief revenue officer, chief commercial officer, any kind of revenue facing type of role, right? There's really, I guess, from the standpoint of there's, the strategic aspect of that role, and then there's the operational and execution aspects, but the leadership aspect, which is probably the most important one of being a CRO, and the things that you have effect over as a leader, as a CRO, is first and foremost, the people. That's the thing that you actually have the most control over relative to everything else, right? And then the subsequent things are, whether it's the productivity or whether it's the how do you lead and manage those teams, right? But that people aspect is the most important one. So the reason why that we wanted to have Adam come in here and talk about this is because if you can't nail the people aspect of your role, whether it's as a leader or bringing on the right teams or building championship teams type of thing, it's going to be a tough slog for you as a CRO. And so one of the things that I thought might be helpful is that when we decide to engage with someone like Adam, who, as you said, has just been fantastic for us and helping us out and really kind of got rid of a lot of the, hubris around hiring and stuff like that. But there's like 3 or 4 things that you as a CRO need to be thinking about when you're engaging with someone like Adam, because otherwise you're going to set each other up for failure. And so I just wanted to tick those off real quickly. And kind of like the first thing that you really got to be, have an understanding of before you start to engage someone like Adam is you need to kind of be what I call 80% there with respect to what you think your go-to-market is going to be, right? And what the ideal customer profile is be. Because most of the time when you're coming in as a CRO, you're likely changing, especially in the B2B world, you're likely changing from, the founder-led sales and that sort of thing, which was a more product-led selling motion, and you're going to be transitioning to more of a problem-led, meaning that you're going to be trying to sift out what is the pain that your customers are experiencing, right? So you need to have some kind of foundational way to assess whether you're getting the right person or not, and be able to guide someone like Adam in getting the right person. The second thing is that, so if you've got that kind of figured out, then you got to go ahead and start looking at, and Adam was a big help to us in this regard, but what does the ideal candidate look like, right? And what should the position description incorporate into that, right? Because you got to align that with whatever your go-to-market's going to be and what your selling motion is going to be, right? And so the position description will typically have things like, the knowledge, the what, the skills, the how they do it, I call it the, for lack of a better word, acumen around the, traits or characteristics of what they, possess. I use the term business athlete, and I think we've talked about that in some of the other episodes, Dennis. And then, of course, the execution experience that they've had. And then the last two things are, you need to have a plan associated with your recruiting and hiring process, because otherwise Adam can't do his job effectively for you. And what does that include? Well, of course, the most important part is, how are you going to go about the sourcing strategy? And Adam is expert at that. And he does a wonderful job in helping us out in those types of things. Then who's going to be involved from your company? What are the questions that you're going to be asking, and who's going to be asking them, so that you don't have basically 3 or 4 people in your organization asking the same questions of the same person. You can't get to decipher who it is you're hiring or what they're good at or not, etc. And then the last thing is you need to make sure that you have what I call a recruiting pitch. Because when there's there's high demand for talent out there, you need to have the right, I'll call it storyline. And I know Adam helped us a lot with that as well, which is why your company versus all the other people that they're speaking with, or the other companies that they're speaking with. And then the last thing is, and I think we kind of universally, all 3 of us always talk about this idea of always be recruiting. Because otherwise you have huge opportunity costs to your organization if you're not doing that. So that is, in a nutshell, the reason why we're having Adam here, to help us walk through these characteristics and these things that we just talked about. So with that said, let her rip, Adam and Dennis.
Yeah, what do you think, Adam, based on what everything Pat just said?
Well, I think Pat summarized that really well, and it does remind me. I don't know if you read this, Pat. There's a book called "Who: The A Method for Hiring." I'm not sure you come across it, but
I am familiar with it. Actually,
you pretty much outlined that there, not intentionally. So if you walk through, it starts with scorecarding. So that's understanding what it is you want to hire. How do you know if you're going to get a good one? Then it's the sourcing. How do we engage these people? And selection, trying to then, score these people against the scorecard, and then selling at the end, which is, if you're competing for the best people, the A players, how do you persuade them that yours is the opportunity? So Pat, you basically summarized it all there, but that's kind of how I view recruiting in these little sections. I'm sure I can get into that throughout the conversation, but each one is equally important for its own merit. The best companies will focus on each of those separately and have a plan for each, basically.
And Adam, for the scorecard piece, I think that's a great framework. Like, if you are listening to this as a sales leader and you're looking at a blank page and you're like, okay, I'm hiring sellers, what kind of things should they have in that scorecard have you seen that are successful characteristics or traits that people should be scoring? Or do you think it depends company by company?
Yeah, it'll depend. But the like 9 times out of 10, when I'm speaking to a company, I'm hiring salespeople, it's domain experience, and that there's levels to that as well, right? So, Dennis, you're in ad tech right now, so some companies might say, we need somebody from ad tech, or we go that layer deeper. It's it's mobile. Or it's it's game, whatever it is. Okay, it's getting to the niches and sub niches, or niches, as Pat will say in the US.
So
it's that domain experience. I think it's a big one. It's the vertical experience and buyer personas. So who do you sell to? And you want to find someone that knows that that audience, that buyer persona. Other things will be sales cycles. So selling. A 3-month sales cycle is very different to navigating 18 months, 2 years to a large international bank, for example, and the stakeholders you're involving. So these are some of the things I'd be looking at. And then I guess from a more cultural perspective, the startup experience. If you're an early stage startup, have they succeeded and walked that path? The tricky one, I think, though, is when you get into the characteristics of somebody, right? So whether it's their, coachability and resilience and whatever else is important to you, they're the ones that I find really hard to actually score on. It's quite easy to tick a box, for have they sold to our market or whatever else. That they're kind of the easy ones to look at, important ones. But I think, getting into the kind of personality traits is important.
Yeah.
Definitely the more challenging aspect.
I'm curious, Adam. Have you learned some kind of best practices as a way to decipher whether or not they possess those personality traits or not, as the case may be, over your years of experience? Because I would agree with you. I think the personality traits and characteristics is the most important thing, in addition to the experience and the the knowledge or the domain experience, etc.
Yeah, that's the part of my job I find the hardest, because every week I will screen dozens of candidates, and the amount of time I spend with them is very short in comparison to when I then pass them over to you guys to interview, and come the final stage of that process, you might have spent 5-6 hours with them in total. So me trying to assess that, I find really hard. I really do. And I don't think there's any magic. People are strange as well, right? People are strange.
Is that a Doors song? I think.
Yeah.
People are strange.
But they are, and salespeople as well. It can be very hard to read. In sales, you can talk a good game generally. So I think it's tricky. But although gut feel should be taken out of the equation, sometimes that's a big part of it as well. And when you have a conversation with somebody, it's how you kind of vibe with them and how they come across. I think Zoom's really important these days. Going back 10 years, it was all phone screens, and I tell you now, the efficiency of doing things over Zoom now is improved so much. The amount of people you can cut out because they just can't hold a good Zoom call. So that's really important as well. So there's an element of reading people as a human, I would say, which is a bit of a fluffy answer, but it's the best I can give you.
But I've noticed from working with you, like, definitely the quality of candidates coming through is you screen out a lot of people. And like, when it comes to salespeople, what are the things where you're like, oh, they said that, I'm gonna have to screen them out? Or like, what are you think the don'ts in terms of candidates, even if it's advice for candidates?
Yeah. I think the big ones, it's when you start discussing deals, right, and getting into quotas, that's when people start to wobble a little bit.
A trip up. Yeah.
So it's looking them in the eye on the camera and asking, right, so what was your quota last year? And I'll go for the last 3 or 4 years. Can they just give me a direct number? And quota and attainment, or is there a big preamble first? Last year was a little bit tricky. It was a bit of a strange one, but and that's when I start, flags start raising. And not to say that sometimes there'll be valid reasons why there isn't a straight answer, but on the whole, you can tell, for me anyway, if there's a reason to be cautious. So I think talking about quota attainment's a big one. Talking through deals. The amount of resumes, you have to be careful looking at resumes. So people will put on there logos closed, and they'll Coca-Cola and Meta, whoever else, all these big brands. But it's like, what did you actually do on that deal? Okay, were you just in the company at the time when that deal was closed? Did you prospect? Did you sit in there on one of the meetings? Like, what did you actually do? What was your input into the deal? So I think it's going beyond just asking, who have you sold to, but actually, how did you do that? What was your involvement? And that's where I tend to kind of have the ability to notice who are the ones to rule out and who are the ones to actually put forward. So I think that's the key one.
That's great. Yeah, I'd agree with Pat as well about like the characteristics or the motivations of that individual or their attitude, like, is so much more impactful a lot of the time than domain expertise or vertical. You can kind of teach someone that, but you can't teach them, like, changing them is hard.
to your point about the resumes, Adam, and I think I've told you this before, and I know Dennis knows this, but I don't read people's resumes because to me, as you just mentioned, right, resumes tell you about, what they did and how they went about doing it and how the performance went, stuff like that. But it doesn't somehow cover any of these traits or characteristics, or I call it the why, the motivation of whether they're going to be successful or not. And so I even tell it to the candidates when I'm talking to them. It's like, I didn't read your resume. Okay, so can you give me a 5-minute overview of what you did and why you think that you're a good fit for this role, type of thing, right? But I think that was one thing that I really appreciated about your process that you did is that you really did kind of try to dig a little bit below the surface to make sure that we had great candidates to bring in. And it was not, you weren't sitting there throwing us volume, right? Oh, okay, I got 10 of them for you here. Here you go. It was like, no, actually, I think I got like 3 or 4 that are really kind of a spot on fit for what you're looking for in your process. And as a CRO, you really appreciate that because, time is the one thing that everybody has the same amount of. And so if you're sitting there, having to spend a lot of cycles on something that's not going to get you closer to your goals versus getting narrowed in on focused on what those things are that are going to get you closer, whether it's the talent, whether it's, go to market stuff, whatever it happens to be, is really appreciated. And it's really, really important, especially when you're in a startup, because time is not your friend. Time is, you got to be moving and going and making decisions and executing and, pushing the ball ahead quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, that's key. I think, Dennis, the amount of times that we've worked together and you're asking me for how are we doing for candidates? I'm saying to you, look, I can give you some candidates, but you're not going to like them. So it's look, we'll wait for the good ones to come through, and that's it. Hire slow and fire fast is the old saying, right? So you're best waiting for the good ones than rushing it because you feel like you've got headcount.
Yeah, I think as well, what you said there about a red flag, like that's so important. You can't just be like, oh, forget about that one point they said or one thing. Because some people are like, oh, I put so much time into this and I've no pipeline. But I think that's a great point about like, if you catch a red flag through it, like be prepared to let go of the fish or be prepared to dig a bit deeper.
I was going to say the way that we characterize that in the organization is I used to tell people, I said, bad breath is not necessarily better than no breath. So just make sure you're not going after any of those, people that it's like red flag. Okay. That's probably not going to work out so well. When you go through your process, what are the things that you need help with from the CRO, the chief commercial, VP of sales, or whatever it happens to be, as it relates to not just the individual contributor types, but when they start to look for people that they're going to start to come into leadership roles or management roles, especially if they don't really have a bench that's going to, scale up to that type of capability.
So what do I need from them? So first of all, I need help just to identify the right people. So it's coming back to the scorecard piece, really. And the big one that I always like is from the domain aspect. Well, which companies should we poach from? Who should we go out and target? And say that unapologetically as well, right? It's okay. Everyone's doing this. It's a sport, and you've got to go out and get the best people. So I think it's just knowing, look, here's 10 companies we'd love to see people from. And that's not an exhaustive list. It just puts me on the right path as a recruiter. I'll use my data sorters and do my thing to find companies like that. But just if I can see a good handful there, it will really help me point in the direction. So I think that's the first thing, is knowing, where do I actually get people from? That gets me off to a good start. And then and I'm just going through the process again from the book that I mentioned before. Then it's, how do I select them? So when I'm speaking to these people, once I've engaged them, how do I know if I've got a good one? Because there's no point saying, well, get me someone from that company, but just because I've done that doesn't mean they're going to be any good. So it's, how do I identify the good ones? So I'll have my questions that I ask everyone that I think are good, going into quotas and deals, but you might have specific things you want to know about as well. So I'll probably say to you, well, when I do my screen, what information would you like me to give you about this person? Okay, it could be something related to the deals that they've done, or something completely obscure that you know about that company, whether it's a certain area of the business that they worked in, whatever it is. But yeah, what information do you want me to get for you? What else do I need is, how do I sell the opportunity? Because there's the selling at the start and the selling at the end. So I'm here to get people at top of funnel into you for interviews, and then at the end we're going to close them off. But the first bit is my job. So I need help knowing, how do I position this opportunity? How does the short term look? How's the long term, medium term? What's in it for them? What's the growth opportunity? And when I ask a lot of sales leaders, right, what's so special about this opportunity? Why should they come and join you? The answer that I always get is, well, we're growing really fast. And it's like, which company isn't growing fast in tech, right? Everyone says that. So what is it, the quantitative aspects about your business, but why they should join you? Whether it's the level of the growth, can you actually put a number on that? How are the sales team performing right now? Why is your product better than your competitors? Whatever it is, but real meaty things that I can then articulate. So I think that's really important, is working with your recruiter, whether it's an internal recruiter, external recruiter. Because I've worked with recruiters before who work within a company and they can't properly pitch the business they're representing because they haven't had that time spent with them by the hiring managers. So hiring managers need to spend time with their recruiters, and the more time they invest at the start, the more time they're going to save later on by just getting really high quality candidates. So they're the key things that I need.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I think I agree with you. I think that it's a two-way street here, right? Especially depending on what the labor market looks like in terms of, how much demand there is versus how much supply there is and things like that. But that last piece that we talk about, you having a plan for your hiring and recruiting process, is just so critical, and particularly your recruiting pitch. And I agree with you. It's just like when you're talking to your customers, right? Well, what is it that we got a bunch of people that kind of look like you and say you all do the same things, right? How is it that you're helping me? What's the problem you're solving? And then how is it that you uniquely do that relative to everybody else? And I think you have to apply the same discipline when you're talking and working with your recruiter, right? And this is how, we're growing, and this is how we're different than all the other alternatives, either whether it's a B2B startup or it's in this market segment or whatever it happens to be. And I guess one of the questions I have for you, Adam, is that you talked about, tell me, 10 of the companies that you would like me to try to poach on, right? I'd like to get your perspective on, do you think it's a good idea to try to go after, the market leaders or 800-pound gorillas that you're trying to take down as a startup? Or do you think it's better to go after people that are in like market segments or industries, but they're at an earlier stage as a startup, so that you get that, I'll call it domain, as in, stage of company domain expertise? Because selling at a big company versus that's an 800-pound gorilla versus selling at a smaller company who's trying to take down the 800-pound gorilla is a very different thing. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think most people would probably say the same, right? And I think, you want to try and get like for like where possible, people who've walked that path already. And I think there is merit in adding maybe a couple of outliers, and bringing in some of that other big company experience, because there's potentially a lot to learn from systems and processes, infrastructure, playbooks, whatever it is. So I think there is something said for that. But yeah, these guys are used to a plethora of inbound leads in a lot of cases, selling off a big brand name. It is very different, right, than coming to a startup and having to educate your prospects first, let them know who you are. There's a lot more legwork. So I think on the whole, it's looking for talent from a similar size and stage of company, or someone that's just been in that path before. So actually, I have a lot of companies, our clients will say to me that I need someone who's taking a CRO who's taking a business from at the early stage, $1 million to 10, or 10 to 50, or maybe 50 and beyond. And that persona is very different. And I think, I'm not sure you guys think here, but it's probably, as a CRO in your career, it's knowing what kind of CRO are you, who, which which company do you specialize in? Where can you serve most value? Because again, there's nuances. Actually, not even nuances. There's big differences, right, to the mission at each stages, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and the bands of revenue that you're trying to grow and stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
Adam, one thing you were saying earlier about like getting a good one in like a good potential hire, someone who's been successful. Do you ever have like people telling you kind of like, oh, like let's say you place someone and then they're like, oh, these are 3 or 4 other people I know within that business that are really good. Or I often think as a sales leader hiring, it's like, oh, if I could just find out who the 2 or 3 best sellers are over there and try and like focus on them. Like, do you focus on that much in your sourcing or not really?
100%. So, my job is, well, a good recruiter is just asking good questions, asking for referrals, finding out who the best people are at any stage we can. So, I might speak to someone at a company and I'll ask what, how big's your sales team and where do you rank? And my next question is, well, who's the top performer then? I'm finding out this information.
It's a good question.
And that is my job constantly. And I always say as well, a great question to ask when you take a reference is, how did this person compare to your top performer? What were they doing this person wasn't? And who was that top performer? And just it's always uncovering this. My job is all about just gathering intel, and networking is huge. And I think if you hire someone from a company and it's been successful, then it's not to say it'll work every time, but there's a good chance it might do. And you know what? I find it harder. I think it's harder to hire an SDR than it is to hire a CRO. Okay.
Wow.
and it's crazy. When I speak to other recruiters who are specializing in the SDR talent pool, I don't understand it, because the fees are lower, and it is so much harder because it is more about the personality traits. Whether CRO, I can look at your LinkedIn profile and I can kind of see your career journey, and I think, well, this person will be pretty good. To get from there to there to there to there, they've done something right. So they won't suddenly just now drop off a cliff face. They're going to be pretty good at what they do. But when you speak to a 2-year experienced SDR, you don't really know what you're getting. It's really tough. So I'm much for hiring senior people is much easier. It should be anyway.
But I'd imagine the reference process, hiring the more senior people, is a lot more more kind of due diligence and stuff, right, by the hiring company.
Yeah, I think so. I think again, it's back to where you got this. When you're doing your screening, it's what is it you want to find out, what's important. But then you mentioned referencing. I think that's something that I don't know. Let's be honest. How many people actually do that? I think it's a part of the process that's skipped quite a lot of the time.
Dangerous, isn't it?
It really is, and I think we've probably all been there though. But I think it's one. I think the mindset sometimes is from people is, well, they give me a reference, I know they're going to give me a good one, so there's no point taking it. And I always say, well, what questions are you asking them? Ask the reference questions to kind of bring out the constructive or the potentially less positive aspects of that person. Because if you just say, oh, I've interviewed this guy Dennis and we're going to offer him a job, but what are your thoughts on him? Yeah, they're going to say he's great. But if you ask,
what do you think are some good questions to ask?
So I'd be saying things like, look, I'm offering Dennis a job, and I'm not sure yet. So I'm curious. Like, if obviously one is, would you hire him again? Or for what reason wouldn't you hire him again? If you were looking for a reason not to hire him, what would it be?
That's a good question.
What was Dennis not doing that the number one performer was? So it's just trying to ask questions in a different way. You don't want to find reasons not to hire people, but most people, when they take a reference, they just get a generic answer. So how can you be a bit smarter with your reference taking to get into the juice a little bit? And that might help a lot.
And it's kind of asking direct questions, but in indirect ways, isn't it, as well? Like what you said there, it's not like what's their biggest weakness. It's literally like, what is it that the top performer is doing that they're not, or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it kind of leads to this whole thing that, I think all that, as a CRO or any hiring manager, and including yourself, Adam, when you're out there recruiting for folks like us, is that, there's no perfect person out there. And so when you're going through the process of speaking with them, right, you have to be able to arm, in this case, me as a CRO with, okay, this is the candidate. This is what is really strong about them and where they can really help you. Here are some of the things that you need to be aware of that you're going to have to figure out, whether it's through development or training or whatever it happens to be. Just be aware of that when you're going into, their engagement with your company, or if they become an employee of your company. You've got to be able to have that purview available to you so that you can make sure that you put them in the best position to be successful. Because I kind of had this philosophy is usually if we hired somebody and we armed them with what they needed to be successful, and we kind of took all the reasons why they weren't going to be successful out of the equation, and they weren't, then that was on me, because didn't probably do the right thing in terms of whether it was show up their weaknesses, or we did something not so great in the hiring process, and or they maybe oversold themselves. But then that's still on me, because maybe I didn't, recognize that as we went through the process. So
yeah, it is. But do you know what, Pat? It's hard because people are just unique, and it's important to hire as best as you possibly can, because ultimately, as a CRO or VP of sales, it comes back to you. But I think equally, you have to cut yourself some slack, and not everyone will work out. You have to accept that at the start, but not every hire you make will work out. Like it really won't. And it's not like I'm sitting here saying I've never hired someone for a company and have left a few months later. It happens, right? Especially in volume. So I think you have to just face that. But it's like it's limiting as much as possible.
What are you seeing? I know what the kind of the statistics were, more recently, but what are you seeing in terms of the attrition rates of, hires and sellers? Probably SDRs is, I'm sure, really high, but in the sellers in the B2B tech space and stuff like that, are you seeing, what are you seeing is kind of the hit rate or the attrition rate in that realm?
Well, I think, first of all, post-COVID, you're seeing shorter stints on people's resumes now. Like that's the trend, and I think that's like what's great is I think more hiring managers empathize with that. Whereas years ago, if there was some short moves, it was really frowned upon actually. But I think there's more of an openness to that now, which is good. And I think it's I think for me it's like I'm looking for that kind of 3+ years is what I'm looking to see on someone's profile. For me to reach out to them, that's what I want to see. I'll make exceptions to that, but if someone's got 3+ years, especially in enterprise sales with longer sales cycles, then I know they would have had time to achieve something. But in a year, if you've got 6 month plus sales cycles, then not really much proof of concept there. So I think that's kind of what I look at. But then in terms of internally for a company that's hiring a lot of people, I'd like to think that for every 6 hires that you're making, that 5 of those are going to be successful. That's roughly what I'd be saying. I don't have any benchmark data overall, but for me that would be something that I'd want to work towards. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I would say, I think if anyone's kind of achieving, I would say 3 out of 4, like 70-75% people working out, I would say they're doing well.
Yeah.
I would say
really well. Really well.
Yeah,
That's a really high hit rate in the
I would
sales world specifically,
Yeah.
as in individual contributors, right? That's what we're talking about.
But I've come into organizations where it's been more like 50%, and like that happens a lot. But you're wasting so much capital all the time. So I think you really got to be striving for like 60s, 70s. I think 80s, 90s, like that's weird. Like
I don't know a lot of 80s and 90s unless they're hanging on to them, and even though they're underperforming, I would just say
true.
So, but to that point, Dennis, which is what I've seen is kind of like if you're in the 60 to 70%, you're doing really well. It's usually more around 50%, kind of turnover type of thing, or hit rate on getting the good ones and that sort of thing. And that's why, this session today hopefully is helpful to people, and why you need to do those things that I talked about at the front end of this, and prepping your company and the person that you're using for your sourcing and recruiting, and then the rest of the organization, so that you can put yourself in the best position to have improve your probability of success, right? So you can be in the 70% hit rate category as opposed to in the 50. And because, as you know, your opportunity cost, a miss on a salesperson is brutal. It is literally probably the equivalent of, a year. If you miss in that first quarter or 6 months, then you got to go out and rehire, and now you're another 6 months behind. I mean, it's like an 18-month penalty of their OTE, basically. So take their OTE, and
I would also say that, like, let's say you hire 6 people, as long as you have like 2 superstars in there, you're doing really well. Like the others could be average and stuff, but if you have 2 people where you have them highly motivated, enjoying their work, and you're managing to keep them, you're doing really well. But it's really tough if you don't hire 1 or 2 superstars. I've always found.
It's the old Pareto principle, right? 80-20 rule.
20.
You're getting 80% of your revenues from 20% of your people. And that does apply in a sales organization, especially the larger sales organizations, as you go along. And to Dennis's point, right? You can have a large sales team and have 2 that just really are the 2 or 3 or whatever the number is, the 20% that are the workhorses carrying it on. But then you do need to have some of the other ones that are kind of in that. We used to categorize them in terms of their productivity. We got the people that are over 100% all the time. Then we have the people that are kind of hitting between 180, depending on the year, and that sort of. You need to have a few of those, and then you got the people that end up going on performance plans or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah. And Adam, one question about this: always be hiring or always be recruiting. Like as a talent partner for a company, how do you treat that? Like, let's say they don't have current headcounts, but are you kind of like, oh, here's some people you should meet, or what's your point of view on always be recruiting?
Sure. So I guess, so first of all, for me, I'm just constantly want to speak to great candidates, even if I don't have a role for them, because I know at some point it'll come off. So my job is just to increase my network of great people, ideally for roles that I'm hiring for, but I just want to get good people into my network. And I think the same mindset should be taken by companies as well. Just always be just adding people on LinkedIn, to your network, and just get them in there. So the senior, especially if you're posting regularly, get them seeing your personal branding. But I think that's something that's really important, to just always be having an eye out for talent. And then, I will, this is how recruiters do their business development. We get a great candidate, and we go to another company who we know will have a soft spot for the company that candidate works for, and we'll say, I've got someone here for you. Would you like to meet them? And if you push the right buttons and the timing's good, you get a result. In fact, I've got an interview taking place right now where there's someone interviewing from a direct competitor of another company. There's no headcount. It's an Israeli startup, and they have no presence in the US, but they're now considering this guy for a first hire in the US to open up the region. And that just came from me sending an email to this guy, with a subject line of the company name, top performer from X, and it's now opened this up. So he's now pitching today to the full board, which to me is great. Like, I'm excited because great, there could be something there for me. But moreover, this company had no plan for that, and they're now on the back of this one killer person. Just gone off and doing something completely different, and they're now looking at that. So that for me is really exciting, and I think as any sales leader should be open-minded to that, and obviously you waste a lot of time if you take every single call, but keep your eyes open, because just one great hire like that out of the blue can change everything for you.
Great. Yeah. All right. Well, Adam, this has been amazing, and I think I'm looking forward to watching it back, take notes for the questions and stuff that you gave as recommendation. But any parting advice for sales leaders out there in terms of when it comes to hiring?
Parting advice, probably just what we just touched upon there. Just always be recruiting. do things yourselves as well. You know, the best sales leaders, you know, should see your part of your job as being a recruiter as well. I think Stephen Bartlett said, every company is essentially a recruitment company, and it's true. You know, every company, their number one job, if they've got aspirations to scale, is to hire great people. So have that mindset. You know, things like headhunting and things like that can feel a bit uncomfortable for some people, which is why they go external to someone like me. But there's ways to do it that is soft and quite passive. And yeah, I think if you're working in a company right now and you're planning to scale, just keep your eyes open, know where the good people live, and just start sending some connection requests out and building your pipeline up.
Great. All right. And our advice, Pat and I, would be to work with Adam. Where could people reach out to you if they want to reach out to you, Adam?
I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn, obviously, or email adam@revhire.io. Check me out on there, and just happy to chat. If anyone wants some advice as well, doesn't matter how early you are, if you're not hiring until your next round of funding, whatever it is, I'm just happy to add some value. So yeah, look forward to hearing from anyone.
Superb. Well, thank you, Adam. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, guys. Loved it. Great fun.
Thank you, Adam. That was great. Really appreciate all your insights.